There's something deeply up with you.
Videos of girls dancing in a Manhattan townhouse, model castings, pornography of all kinds. These are just a few of the more than 2,000 videos released under the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Plus, there are interviews where Epstein calls himself a Tier 1 sexual predator.
Do you think you're the devil himself?
I don't know. Why would you say that?
We dug through hours of footage to find some of the creepiest but most telling clips. Welcome to
Tonight. A story that many believed had faded into the background is once again dominating headlines, timelines, and late-night conversations. Newly released documents tied to one of the most notorious criminal cases in modern history have reignited a political fight
about the Epstein files these past few weeks. The emails, the case summaries, the reports, the photos, unfortunately. What about the videos? What about the tapes? What about the Epstein tapes? From a legal point of view, I will tell you sometimes I can't think of a more compelling piece of evidence to show a jury than videos, because videos, they capture something that no other piece of evidence can. Movements, actions, time, behavior. And here, again, I'll throw in the unfortunately, there are tapes in the Epstein files release that we got to talk about. We are referring to more than 2,000 videos with hours of footage, all a part of the Department of Justice's release of materials through the Epstein Files Transparency Act. And this includes the tapes of Jeffrey Epstein himself, which are particularly strange because we never really hear this guy speak before, let alone in this way. And remember, he's the man at the center of all this, and we'll get to that. But I do want to preface this by saying that much of the footage is redacted, and we don't know the ages or the identities of the women and the girls that have been covered by black boxes, so I'll be just calling them females since, again, we don't know how old they are. Now, I do want to talk about arguably some of the most uncomfortable clips first, okay? Some of the footage included in the release is pretty innocuous. Someone playing with a small dog, what looks like a promotional piece for Little St. James Island, often called Epstein's Island, which he owned. Now, I say innocuous, we know what was happening on that island was allegedly not innocent. Multiple victims have come forward to say that they were assaulted and abused on that island. That island is also the centerpiece for many potential scandals, with people questioning whether some of the world's wealthiest and most powerful people visited it. If there's a claim that you visited that island, it's as toxic as it gets. Now, some of the clips, although they're redacted, obviously pornography sites. It's unclear how many of the clips were from legitimate online porn sites and how many were created by Epstein's victims at his behest, but several of the porn videos have website watermarks at the bottom referencing teens, unfortunately. But other videos are just strange. For example, you got this selfie video of Epstein making weird and unsettling faces into the camera. There's another that shows him standing up on a countertop in a large kitchen and then getting down and literally chasing a female around the room. Again, I don't know how old this person is. There's also footage of him dancing with someone in what appears to be a hallway. You know what? Actually, there are lots of dancing videos, with several apparently filmed in Epstein's office at his home in New York City. And I just gotta say this, how creepy is this one? In one of the videos, you can clearly see a paternity test, this kit sitting on Epstein's desk. Some of the footage is especially unsettling because while we don't know the age of the females in the video, there are also stuffed animals visible in the frame. For example, this selfie video of someone holding a Cookie Monster doll, and another, which we can assume based on the context contains pornographic material, shows a teddy bear in the background. And there's even a video of someone playing with a young child, handing them various toys and stuffed animals. We don't know who this child is, where this video was taken, the connection to Epstein, but obviously really concerning. And remember, before he died, he was facing federal sex trafficking of minors charges. There's also around 14 hours of footage in all, and much of it is made up of short snippets of video. There's almost zero context provided for where the videos came from, who they show, why Epstein might have kept them, whether or not they were going to be pivotal in his criminal trial. I'll tell you this, there's a clip of someone filming a woman receiving a massage, and pretty disturbing when you consider that Epstein and his partner Ghislaine Maxwell, they were accused of luring teen girls to his home with the promise.
Firestorm. The files, long anticipated and heavily scrutinized, are now fueling renewed debate over past associations, elite circles, and the blurred lines between power and accountability. For years, the case represented more than just the crimes of one individual. It symbolized a shadowy network of influence, privilege, and secrecy. It raised uncomfortable truths about how wealth and status can create protective barriers, how access can translate into immunity, and how certain circles operate behind closed doors. Now, As more paperwork becomes public, those old connections are being placed back under a microscope. Public trust in institutions has been fragile for years. Financial crises, political polarization, global pandemics, and cultural upheavals have strained confidence in leadership. When high-profile figures appear in proximity to criminal enterprises, even indirectly, that trust erodes further. Transparency becomes more than a political talking point. It becomes a demand. Commentators across the
files in this Epstein release, there was a 2014 email sent by Epstein that says, "Let's get 3 motion-detected hidden cameras that record, thanks." And there's long been speculation that Epstein was filming basically everything all the time in order to use the videos to blackmail the world's elite. That was a common allegation, a common theory, but in an email included in the files, there was an agent who sent the following to then FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino, and it says, quote, "During the searches of Epstein's New York residence and USVI residence in 2019, the FBI searched for videos and surveillance cameras. My understanding from the case agent is that there were no cameras found inside any bedrooms or living areas of either residence. I understand that surveillance cameras were located near the entrances of the residences." So if that's true, okay, that's strange, but also, did something change? I don't know. You know, is it always the case that there wasn't something there, or why they couldn't find it? I don't know. It's just interesting to say the least. But next I mentioned hearing from Epstein himself, right? So a big part of this is a long interview that was conducted by Steve Bannon, former White House chief strategist. And according to the files, there was this idea, seemingly, to try to rehabilitate Epstein's image by producing a documentary about him. It's unclear why Bannon would have wanted to do this, but remember, this is after Epstein pleaded guilty to Florida state charges of solicitation of prostitution of a minor. And I mean, the files, they show a lot of communication between the two, texts, emails, several photos of the two of them together, really looking at that 2018-2019 timeframe. I mean, I'll give you an idea. Epstein said in one message to Bannon, "I don't like texting," to which Bannon replied, "Got it." February 2019, before Epstein was federally indicted, Epstein wrote to Bannon, "Do you think I can do my own video interview and upload it on YouTube?" Woody said he would help edit, not sure how to stage, what points to make, but better than trying to do an interview that I have no experience doing. Goal to humanize the monster. I will note here it's believed he's talking about Woody Allen, and the text that Epstein sent to Bannon just before this exchange reads, "Dinner with Woody or too many pedos in one place?" Yikes, to say the least. And Bannon, by the way, also laid out this plan. Quote, "First, we need to push back on the lies, then crush the pedo trafficking narrative, then rebuild your image as philanthropist." To be clear, Bannon hasn't been accused of a crime. He's been very vocal about wanting the files to be made public. And even though the documentary was never produced, we have this footage, okay? You get this footage where Bannon is interviewing Epstein. It kind of gives you a window into this guy that you never saw before because, again, we don't really have that much of him even speaking. But take a look.
How did a schmuck like you get on the board of Rockefeller? What year was that?
I don't remember. Late, I think 89 and 91.
So that's one of the most prestigious research places in the world, correct?
Yes.
Okay, how did a guy like you get on the board of a blue blood, internationally known, hard research, Nobel Prize winners all over the place? How do they pick a guy like you, a trader from, or basically some guy from Bear Stearns?
Good question. So I was asked to be on the board of Rockefeller.
Yeah, the interview primarily focuses on Epstein's reputation as this apparent financial genius, someone who was practically clairvoyant when it came to markets around the world. And to give you kind of context here, when Epstein was arrested for soliciting a minor for prostitution out in Palm Beach in Florida, this is, again, he made that deal in 2008. The United States was dealing with a huge financial crisis at the time, remember? And so when Bannon asked Epstein about his
spectrum are analyzing the implications. Some legal experts caution against conflating association with guilt. They stress that being mentioned in documents does not equate to participation in crimes. They emphasize the importance of evidence-based conclusions rather than speculation-driven outrage. Others argue that ethical leadership requires not only legal innocence but moral clarity. The renewed scrutiny also highlights the power of documentation. In an era where digital records are permanent, archived, and searchable, the past rarely stays buried. Photographs, guest lists, event footage, and travel logs can resurface decades later. Political careers that once relied on controlled narratives now operate in a landscape where archival material can disrupt messaging instantly. Legal scholars remind audiences that document releases are often complex. Names may appear in contexts that reflect routine interactions rather than criminal behavior. The presence of an individual in a log does not automatically
knowledge of what was happening behind the scenes at some of the country's largest investment firms. Epstein also talked about his time behind bars.
How did you hear about what was going to happen to Lehman Brothers, and what did you immediately think when you heard they was going to be put into bankruptcy?
I'm glad you asked that question. I was in solitary confinement September 14th. And I mean, again, some of the public stories about the wonderful time I had in jail and my work release, which didn't come till months after. I'd been there since June in an 8x10 cell with a bed in the back, a 6-foot bed in the back, a chrome sink with a toilet attached to it, and a little piece of metal sticking out that was supposed to act as a table. Now, since I was in jail, there were no books. Why? There's no library. No library, but you're in jail. No, I was in jail, not prison. So in jail, I was in a place what's called the Special Housing Unit, which is for the roughest, toughest, meanest people. They had put me there, they said, for my own protection. So I was in a 8x10 cell with a little slit in the door where they would serve my food on a tray about 9 inches by 4 inches. And then as soon as I finished eating, they would take the tray and close it down. And one of the guards said, "Do you understand there's Wall Street's crashing. I'm worried about my pension fund. What should I do?" And I said, "Sorry, Wall Street's crashing? What's happened?" And he said, "There's some crisis and some companies are going bankrupt." I said, "Are you sure?" And he said, "Yeah, it's all over the papers. We're all terrified we're going to lose our life savings because we have either a 401k or our pension funds. We don't know anything about money. Mr. Epstein, can you tell us, like, what's going on? Am I going to be able to afford my children's education? Am I going to be bankrupt like this company called Lehman Brothers?" And there's another company in the front page today called Bear Stearns. "Oh no," I said. Why? Because that's the company I was a partner in. And in fact, that was a company I had a very large investment in. So, as a great story, I didn't have my Wall Street Journal, but in the early mornings, you're allowed to make 2 phone calls, collect. And when you pick up the phone, you can dial a number, and when the person picks up, they say, "You're getting a call from the Palm Beach County Jail. Will you accept reverse charges?" And the person either says yes, and the call goes through, or the person says no. The person I had called was Jimmy Kane, the president of Bear Stearns. And I said, "Tell me what's going on." And so that my knowledge of the financial crisis happened with Jimmy, who was at the center of the storm, telling me about what Lehman had gone under, and they were trying to figure out a way, should they bail out Bear Stearns? The question you want to ask is, who was the other call to?
Okay, who was the other call to?
The other call was to my friend at J.P. Morgan.
imply knowledge of illicit activity. Nonetheless, public perception does not always hinge on legal nuance. Optics carry weight. Political strategists are undoubtedly calculating the impact. Poll numbers, fundraising metrics, and campaign narratives all respond to controversy. Whether the renewed focus alters public opinion remains uncertain. In deeply polarized environments, new information often reinforces existing beliefs rather than changing minds. There is also a broader conversation about transparency in governance. Calls for full disclosure extend beyond this single case. Advocates argue that public officials should proactively release records to eliminate suspicion. They contend that secrecy fuels conspiracy theories, while openness builds credibility. Skeptics counter that constant document dumps can overwhelm the public and create confusion. They argue that selective interpretation can distort context. In the absence of clear conclusions, speculation fills the gaps. The resurfacing of these files also reflects
a grooming kind of thing too. I'm only looking out for you, but how about this one? A riddle that honestly you're not going to soon forget. So it's written to Jeffrey Epstein, April 29th, 2013. What is greater than God, more evil than devil? Reach, need it, poor have it, and if you eat it, you will die. What is it? And the email in this conversation at one point back is, or your bleep, meaning female genitalia, either works. And this person writes back, ha ha ha, great answer, I like it, but poor don't have my bleep. How about this one? Actually, I think this one is important in a sex trafficking context, okay? So this is from Jeffrey Epstein to, again, an unidentified individual. Okay, now it's time to send me great sexy photos, no excuses. Person writes back, you will be receiving at least one sexy photo every single day until the day I see you in New York in the end of October. First one soon to come, with a wink face. And this is important. Epstein writes back, your trip will depend on how sexy they are. Okay. So in a sex trafficking case, the prosecution would need to prove that the defendant enticed or recruited a victim to engage in sex acts. It's kind of commercial sex, right? So if you reward somebody or you promise something of value to get sex, those are key elements, key evidence in this kind of criminal case. So sexy photos in exchange for a trip, maybe the argument could be, hey, he was just tongue in cheek, maybe he was joking, but you could see how prosecutors could say that is evidence of sex trafficking, or maybe just something to think about. By the way, just talking gross for a second, I gotta mention Peter Attia. This is the anti-aging influencer. You've probably seen him on social media, recently appointed contributor at CBS News, although it does become a question about his role at that company moving forward. He was mentioned almost 2,000 times in the Epstein files, the newly released Epstein files, specifically emails between him and Epstein from 2015 to 2018. And I'm not gonna lie, they're really, really disgusting. Attia wrote in one email to Epstein in February of 2016 that a woman's private part is, quote, low carb. Added, still awaiting results on gluten content though. How about this email dated June 24th, 2015 with the subject line, got a fresh shipment, where Attia seemingly writes, the biggest problem with becoming friends with you, the life you lead is so outrageous, and yet I can't tell a soul. Kind of chilling when you think about Epstein and the fact that he was, again, brought up on federal sex trafficking charges of minors, accused of abusing minors for years. But Attia went on the defensive. He wrote a long response on X, reads in part, reading that exchange now is very embarrassing and I will not defend it. I'm ashamed of myself for everything about this. At the time, I understood this exchange as juvenile, not a reference to anything dark or harmful. He added that he did not participate in any criminal activity. He also added that he was, quote, never on his plane, never on his island, and never present at any sex parties. I will say Attia stepped down from his role as chief science officer at the snack bar company David Protein. It was also reported that a 60 Minutes segment that he was featured on has been pulled. And again, no word at the time of this recording on the future of his association with CBS, but we'll see. Oh, this one was a surprising one. Didn't expect this. In the Epstein files, there was a reference to Diddy. Yeah, a connection to another major federal sex crimes defendant in recent history, P. Diddy. So this was from somebody, unidentified, to Jeffrey Epstein, January 1st, 2013. How are you feeling? We were invited to Ike Batista boat on the 2nd, went to P. Daddy party, met some interesting PPL people, didn't see Elon though. Miss you, kiss. 2013? Lot to break down here. To be clear, going to a Diddy party doesn't mean you were part of criminal activity or knew about it, but those parties came under a lot of scrutiny after Diddy was hit with over 50 lawsuits claiming
the enduring fascination with scandal involving elites, stories that combine wealth, secrecy, and moral failure capture attention in ways few other topics can. They tap into public frustration with inequality and perceived double standards. Yet beneath the spectacle lies a serious issue: how societies hold powerful individuals accountable. The original case demonstrated how systemic failures allowed misconduct to persist. The renewed scrutiny of past associations forces institutions to examine whether those failures extended further than previously acknowledged. For some observers, the controversy represents unfinished business. They believe that only complete transparency will restore confidence. For others, it represents political theater, a recycling of known information for strategic gain. The coming weeks will likely bring more analysis, more commentary, and perhaps additional releases. Each new detail will be scrutinized for significance. Each public statement will be dissected for tone and implication. In the end, this story is about more than
sexual abuse and then charged with federal sex trafficking, racketeering, and prostitution counts. He was ultimately acquitted of the most serious charges at his very publicized trial, but he was convicted of transportation to engage in prostitution. He's currently in prison. But the Elon thing is interesting too, though, okay? Because assuming we're talking Elon Musk, I mean, I don't know another Elon that would come into play here, but Elon Musk emails 2012, 2013, there were emails where it seemed to suggest the two were trying to meet up, him and Epstein. For example, December 2013, We'll be in the BVI St. Bart's area over the holidays. Is there a good time to visit? And then there was a response from JEE Vacation. I will send heli for you, seemingly a helicopter. Actually, I could fly back early on the 3rd. We will be in St. Bart's. When should we head to your island? On the 2nd? Did we need to organize Elon to your island on January 2nd? And Musk appeared to ask Epstein in one email, what day or night will be the wildest party on your island? Now, it doesn't appear that ever happened, that he visited. In fact, Musk had previously tweeted that Epstein was a creep, that he tried repeatedly to get him to visit the island. He always declined. And Musk also responded more recently on X that no one pushed harder than me to have the Epstein files released. And I'm glad that has finally happened. I had very little correspondence with Epstein and declined repeated invitations to go to his island or fly on his Lolita Express. He was well aware that some email correspondence with him could be misinterpreted and used by detractors to smear my name. Okay, the next one I want to get into is something that's tied to a recent episode of Sidebar we did. There is a message from Corinna to Epstein, okay? And there are links in this email to very graphic pornography sites. Now, why is this important? It's from September 2012. Why is this important? As we reported, Corinna Shuliak, if this is really her, if she's really sending this email, Corinna Shuliak appears to be Epstein's secret girlfriend. The person that he planned to leave the bulk of his fortune, $100 million, and properties to when he died. She apparently spoke to him 20 minutes the night before he died. There was even evidence that he was contemplating marrying her. Now, on one hand, couples sharing porn or engaging in private sexual conduct or behavior, whatever, each their own. But on the other hand, you can see why this looks weird, right? Considering who Epstein was. Now, she has never been formally accused of wrongdoing or charged with a crime, but just something I have to mention here with this email. By the way, big thing in the Epstein files release was his connection to the rich, the powerful, the notorious. And a name that constantly pops up, and an email that's very disturbing regarding him, is Woody Allen, former neighbor. Just got to call out this email. So creepy. So Epstein seems to joke about being accused of going to a pedophile convention when he was going to visit Paris with director Woody Allen, writing this in 2012. So this was an email back to someone who said to Epstein, like asking, I guess as a joke, "Les pedophile convention?" And Epstein writes back, "I think pedophile is the plural." It's weird. It's not even like he's denying it. It's just strange. Now I got to go to this. This has been making a ton of news. So another disturbing email in this list is a reported exchange between Epstein and Peter Mandelson. This is a prominent British politician, former diplomat, UK ambassador to Washington at one point, causing a lot of uproar. So this exchange from 2009 allegedly surrounds Epstein's release from prison after serving 13 of his 18-month sentence, again, on those charges of solicitation of prostitution and of solicitation of prostitution of a minor. And here's how that went. So this is from Jeffrey Epstein, July 22nd, 2009. He writes him, or allegedly writes Mandelson, "Free and home." Mandelson seemingly writes back, "How shall
one individual or one former leader. It is about power structures, accountability mechanisms, and the long memory of public records. It is about how past associations can echo into present realities. It is about the tension between legal standards and public expectations. As the controversy unfolds, the broader lesson may lie in the importance of vigilance. Networks of influence thrive in opacity. Transparency challenges them. Documentation preserves truth, even when it takes years to surface. Political careers are shaped not only by policies and speeches but by associations and judgments. In an age where information is both abundant and contested, the public must navigate carefully between evidence and assumption. The resurfacing of these documents has reopened debates that many hoped were closed. Whether it leads to substantive consequences or fades into the cycle of news remains to be seen. What is certain is that the intersection of power and secrecy continues to captivate and concern. As viewers, citizens, and participants in democratic systems, the responsibility lies in seeking clarity, resisting manipulation, and demanding accountability from all corners of influence. The documents may be complex, the narratives competing, and the interpretations divided, but the underlying principle remains constant: transparency matters. And in a world where the past is never truly past, every page released has the potential to reshape the present conversation. Epstein case back in focus as Trump's name trends across social media. For political strategists, moments like this are high stakes. Poll numbers can shift, fundraising narratives can change, campaign messaging may pivot. Even if no new legal developments emerge, perception alone can influence momentum. Experts also warn of misinformation risks. Old documents are sometimes misrepresented, edited clips can distort timelines, context matters, but context often travels slower than outrage. At the same time, the trending discussion underscores a public appetite for answers. People want clarity, they want assurance that justice applies equally, they want transparency in spaces where secrecy once dominated. Whether this wave results in new investigations or simply another cycle of digital debate remains uncertain. What is clear is that the intersection of elite networks and political leadership continues to captivate public attention. The name trending across platforms is not just a statistic, it represents a larger cultural tension between loyalty and accountability, between narrative control and digital transparency, between legal thresholds and moral expectations. As the conversation evolves, one thing remains constant: in the age of social media, history is never truly archived, it waits, and when the algorithm brings it back to the surface, it demands to be examined all over again.